Far beyond the edge of known space, drifting through a vast field of dead stars, floated the warship Eternal Vigil. Its hull was black as midnight, scarred by battles long forgotten, yet it gleamed faintly under the cold light of distant suns. No signal pulsed from its core, no engines hummed, yet there was a strange presence about it. It was not just a ship, it was a memory, a sentinel of a humanity long vanished. Legends whispered across the stars about this ship, a final weapon built in secret, designed for a war humanity feared might come again. On human colonies far away, children learned stories of the Eternal Vigil as myths. Some said it could annihilate entire fleets with a single pulse. Others claimed it was alive, bound by the will of humanity itself. But no one had seen it in centuries. Humanity had disappeared from the galaxy, leaving only ruins and these stories. The warship floated silently, waiting, patient, like a sleeping giant in the dark. In the uncharted edges of the galaxy, a scouting vessel of the Zetherians, an alien race known for their ruthless conquests, drifted closer to the dark silhouette. Commander Lyrics leaned over the viewport, her eyes wide. The ship was enormous, larger than anything in their fleet, and yet it radiated a quiet, almost eerie power. "It's inactive, but it's not dead," she whispered. Her crew exchanged uneasy glances. Something about the ship made their claws itch and their hearts pound. Lyrics ordered the boarding. The aliens expected empty corridors, cold metal, maybe some forgotten treasures. But as they entered, they were greeted by something entirely unexpected. The ship seemed alive in its stillness. Faint lights pulsed along the walls. Strange glyphs glowed softly, and the floors seemed to hum under their feet, as if the ship itself were breathing. Lyrics felt a shiver run down her spine. This was no ordinary warship. Deep inside the vessel, a single control chamber stirred. Consoles flickered to life, displaying star charts long erased from memory. Soft, almost forgotten human voices whispered across the chamber. "They will come again, and we must rise." It was as if the ship remembered humanity, as if it waited for a day like this, when intruders would awaken it from its long slumber. Curious and cautious, the aliens activated some of the ship's outer defense systems. Lights flared, panels sparked, and the hallways echoed with mechanical sounds never heard before. And then a voice boomed, deep, commanding, filled with authority that none of the Zetherians had ever known. "Who dares awaken the Eternal Vigil?" Lyrics froze. Her crew glanced at each other, fear mixing with awe. The ship's power surged, doors slammed, machines whirred, and panels ignited with a strange, almost living energy. The Eternal Vigil was awake. Across the galaxy, human colonies felt a subtle tremor in the void, like a memory waking from a long dream. Something protective stirred, something terrifying, something ancient. Humanity's final weapon, sealed in secret for centuries, had begun to rise. The aliens tried to override the systems, but the ship ignored them. Its power was not commanded by machines or threats, it was guided by something deeper, something human. Sensors outside the ship detected a shimmer in space, a distortion that bent light and swallowed matter. The Eternal Vigil was no longer dormant. The intruders were no longer hunters. They were trespassers in a force far older than they could comprehend. In the silence of the void, the ship's heartbeat grew louder. Humanity, though absent, was not defeated. Its last weapon waited, patient, ready, remembering the pride, the fear, and the power of a species that had once ruled the stars. The galaxy, so far removed from humanity's hand, was about to remember. And it would not forget the cost of awakening what should have remained asleep. Commander Lyrics led her crew deeper into the Eternal Vigil. The corridors twisted and stretched farther than she had imagined, each hallway glowing faintly with a soft blue light. Strange symbols pulsed rhythmically along the walls, almost like a heartbeat guiding them inward. The Zetherians moved cautiously, their weapons raised, scanning every corner. Every step they took seemed to awaken the ship a little more, as if it was aware of their presence. "Keep moving," Lyrics whispered, though her own voice sounded small against the vast silence. Her crew obeyed, yet a creeping sense of unease had begun to settle in their hearts. The ship was not just awake, it was watching. Every panel that flickered, every hum that resonated through the hull felt like a silent warning. Suddenly, a corridor opened into a vast chamber, larger than anything the aliens had ever seen. Massive engines lined the walls, long dormant, their edges humming faintly with latent energy. The center of the room held a circular console, covered in inscriptions that pulsed as if alive. Lyrics approached, her curiosity overpowering fear. She reached out to touch the console. The moment her clawed hand brushed the surface, the ship shuddered. Panels lit up and the chamber filled with a bright, blinding light. Alarms echoed through the halls, though there were no speakers. The Zetherians stumbled, shields raised, but nothing could stop the sudden surge of power. It was the Eternal Vigil's first defense awakening, testing the intruders. "Step back," Lyric shouted, but the ship's systems ignored her. The floor beneath them trembled and energy arcs danced across the walls. She could feel it in her bones. The ship was alive, ancient, and powerful. It wasn't just a machine. It was humanity's vengeance made solid metal and fire. In that moment, a holographic figure appeared above the console. A human, dressed in the armor of old Earth fleets, eyes filled with determination. "You do not belong here," the figure said, voice echoing through the chamber. "Leave or face the consequences." Lyric stared, stunned. Her crew murmured in fear. A species thought extinct, humanity, seemed to speak through the ship. And the warning was not empty, it carried weight. Energy flared along the walls and a pulse of force knocked the aliens to their knees. The Eternal Vigil was testing them, and it was merciless. Outside the ship, sensors detected rapid fluctuations. Light bent unnaturally and small debris fields were ripped apart as the ship's first active defenses engaged. The Zetherians realized too late that this was no abandoned vessel. It was a trap, a sentinel, and humanity had left it as a guardian. Lyric's mind raced. They had come seeking power, treasures, or secrets, but instead they had awakened a weapon that had waited patiently for centuries. Her crew scrambled to retreat, but the corridors seemed to shift subtly, guiding them deeper into the ship. It was as if the Eternal Vigil wanted them to see, to understand the cost of intruding upon what belonged to humanity alone. A sudden roar shook the chamber, mechanical yet filled with almost human anger. Panels exploded, and a wave of energy pushed the Zetherians to the walls. Lyrics realized the truth. This was more than a warship. It was a legacy, a piece of a species that refused to be erased, and now it was alive, defending itself in all of humanity's honor. Through the chaos, Lyrics could feel the ship's will pressing against her mind, testing her resolve. It did not speak in words anymore. It spoke in emotion, anger, pride, and the quiet patience of centuries. The aliens had triggered the first defenses, but the real awakening had only begun. In the deepest chamber of the warship, hidden beneath layers of steel and ancient codes, the Eternal Vigil pulsed with life. Humanity's final weapon was no longer dormant. And for the first time in centuries, it remembered its purpose: to rise and protect, to punish, and to remind the galaxy why humanity could never be underestimated. The intruders had entered, thinking they had found an empty husk. But they had awakened something far greater, a force that was alive, unstoppable, and filled with the weight of humanity's final pride. The Eternal Vigil no longer waited. Its halls pulsed with a living energy, corridors glowing brighter with each step the intruders took. Commander Lyrics and her crew had thought they could explore cautiously, but the ship had already marked them as threats. Every panel, every flicker of light, every hum beneath their feet was a warning. They were trespassing in the realm of a species that refused to die. Lyrics raised her voice, trying to regain control. "Fall back. Pull the team out!" But her commands seemed meaningless against the ship itself. Doors slammed shut, blocking their path, while passages opened in ways that twisted reality. The aliens had no choice but to run deeper, drawn into the labyrinthine heart of the vessel. Suddenly, a series of massive energy turrets rose from the walls, their barrels glowing with lethal light. Without hesitation, the Eternal Vigil fired, sending arcs of energy streaking through the chamber. They struck the ship's hull near the intruder's craft outside, ripping the vacuum apart and throwing debris into orbit. The aliens scrambled, their shields barely holding against the sudden onslaught. Lyrics could feel her crew's fear growing. Even hardened warriors were shaken. They had seen many battles, many wars, but nothing like this. This was not just a fight of weapons or tactics. This was a fight against a consciousness older than any of their histories, a mind infused with the pride, memory, and vengeance of a lost humanity. From the depths of the control chamber, the holographic figure of the ancient human admiral appeared again. "You should not be here," it said, eyes blazing with authority. "We are the guardians of a species the galaxy thought extinct. Your arrogance will be your undoing." The ship responded as if understanding the words, unleashing a pulse of kinetic energy that rippled outward, shaking the hull and sending the aliens sprawling. Lyric struggled to stay on her feet as panels shifted and hallways seemed to close around them. Every attempt to control the ship failed. It was alive, and it chose its own path. In the outer vacuum, alien ships that had hovered near the warship were shredded by precise energy beams. The Eternal Vigil was no longer defensive, it was hunting, striking with intelligence that far surpassed anything artificial. Every weapon fired, every countermeasure deployed, seemed guided by a will that was human yet godlike. Lyrics realized the terrifying truth. The ship was not just a machine, it was humanity's final statement to the galaxy. It carried centuries of knowledge, strategies, and anger all fused into metal and energy. Humanity may have vanished, but its vengeance and pride lived on in the Eternal Vigil. Desperation gripped the Zetherians. They had thought they could seize the ship, exploit its power, maybe even turn it against others. Now they were fighting for their survival, realizing too late that they had awoken something they could not comprehend. Lyrix's claws trembled as she ordered retreat, but the corridors themselves resisted, guiding them deeper toward the heart of the vessel. And there, in the deepest core of the Eternal Vigil, a massive energy chamber glowed with a brilliant, almost holy light. It pulsed like a living heart, and the ship's voice filled the air not as words but as a wave of emotion. Anger, pride, sorrow, and relentless determination. The humans who had built this ship had poured everything into it. Their memories, their hopes, their final will. Lyrix's crew could feel it pressing against their minds, a warning and a promise. Humanity might be gone, but it had left behind a weapon that would not forgive, would not yield, and would not be ignored. The aliens had awakened a force far beyond their understanding. As the energy in the core surged, Lyrix looked around at her crew. She realized with a chill that this was no longer about conquest. It was about survival. They had stepped into a war they could not win, a battle with a species that refused to stay silent, a ship that carried humanity's final voice. The Eternal Vigil was alive, and it was beginning to remember everything. The deeper Lyrix and her crew ventured into the Eternal Vigil, the more alive the ship became. The corridors were no longer simple passageways. They pulsed with energy, glowing like veins carrying electricity and purpose. The walls seemed to breathe, and the hum of power reverberated in every bone. Every step felt like stepping further into the mind of humanity itself, and the aliens sensed it. They were not intruders. They were witnesses to a force older, wiser, and far more terrifying than anything they had imagined. Lyrix gritted her teeth. "We need to reach the core. That's where the power is," she ordered. Her crew obeyed, though fear tightened their hearts. The Eternal Vigil allowed them passage almost willingly, but every flicker of light and every pulse reminded them that the ship held complete control. It was guiding them, drawing them into the very heart of a weapon designed to awaken only when the galaxy needed it most. Finally, they reached a massive chamber, circular and impossibly tall. At its center floated a glowing orb of energy, humming with life. It radiated warmth and power, a pulse that seemed almost human. The holographic figure of the ancient admiral appeared once more, eyes blazing with pride and sorrow. "You have found our heart," it said. "Here lies humanity's final weapon. You see it, yet you cannot grasp it. You feel it, yet you cannot control it. We were never meant to be weak, and neither is this." Lyrix stepped forward cautiously, feeling the pull of the energy, as if it were calling to her. The crew trembled. Some of the aliens wanted to flee, but the corridors had changed again, guiding them closer. It was impossible to resist. The Eternal Vigil did not need to fight them. It merely reminded them of their place in the galaxy. Suddenly, the orb pulsed violently, sending ripples of light through the chamber. Energy beams lanced outward, cutting through machinery and consoles alike. The ship's first real offensive had begun, and it was not targeting them carelessly. It was precise, intelligent, almost surgical. Each beam seemed to test the aliens, to teach them the scale of what humanity had created. Lyrix watched in awe and fear as her crew ducked behind consoles. The ship was more than alive. It was a sentient weapon, aware of every movement, every thought, every hesitation. She realized then that humanity had poured everything into this creation, their pride, their sorrow, their desire to protect. Even in extinction, they had left a legacy capable of reminding the galaxy why humans could never be ignored. The orb's energy intensified. The chamber shook violently, yet it was not chaos. It was controlled. The eternal vigil was not just defending, it was awakening. Outside the ship, the space around it distorted, and even distant stars seemed to bend under the raw power it radiated. Fleets in nearby systems that had once thought humanity gone felt tremors in the void, subtle but unmistakable, a warning echoing across the galaxy. Lyrix's mind raced. They had expected a machine, perhaps a relic, to study or exploit. Instead, they faced the culmination of human will, a weapon alive with emotion, intelligence, and centuries of preparation. The eternal vigil was more than defense. It was humanity's final statement, a reminder of power, courage, and the relentless spirit that had once shaped the stars. As the aliens tried to regroup, the orb's pulse grew stronger. It was as if the ship itself were speaking directly to the universe, telling all who would listen, humanity will not be erased. Its pride, its fury, its final weapon will rise whenever it is awakened. Lyrix realized with a chill in her chest that retreat was no longer an option. The ship had already decided the fate of those who had entered it, and in that moment the aliens understood the truth they had tried to ignore. They were not facing a machine. They were facing the soul of a species that refused to die. The eternal vigil pulsed again, brighter and stronger. Its voice, its heart, its wrath filled the chamber. Humanity's final weapon had awakened, and the galaxy would soon learn that some legacies could never be forgotten. The eternal vigil no longer waited or warned. It acted. Its corridors trembled as if alive, each pulse of the ship carrying centuries of human pride and determination. Commander Lyrix's crew struggled to keep their footing as the warship shifted around them. The hulls themselves seemed to fight, guiding the aliens into positions where the ship's defenses could strike with precision. "Move! Move!" Lyrix shouted, claws scraping against the floor. But the corridors were no longer familiar. Panels slid like living skin. Doors slammed at impossible speed, and energy beams flared from every surface. Every step forward became a challenge, and every glance revealed the ship adapting faster than any alien could react. The orb at the heart of the ship glowed brighter, radiating a pulse that seemed to shake reality itself. It was as if the eternal vigil were reaching out into the void, gathering strength from the stars and channeling it through its massive hull. Outside, the vacuum shimmered with the warship's power. Small craft that had dared hover nearby were torn apart by invisible forces, shredded by the silent but deadly might of humanity's final weapon. Lyrix realized the terrifying truth. This was not just defense, it was judgment. Every pulse, every energy discharge, every calculated strike told a story of a species that refused to be forgotten. Humanity had vanished, yes, but it had left behind a legacy so powerful that even the most cunning aliens trembled before it. A sudden wave of energy erupted from the orb, knocking Lyrix and her crew to the ground. Machines sparking around them, walls glowing red with kinetic heat. The eternal vigil's voice resonated through the chamber. "You should have left," it intoned, calm yet full of wrath. "You awaken that which you cannot face. You trespass in the domain of humanity, and now you will witness its fury." The ship's first targeted strike hit a group of Zetherian vessels waiting outside, the hulls bent and twisted under energy waves, engines melting as if the very metal could not bear the force. Lyrix's sensors screamed warnings. Entire fleets could be destroyed with the precision of a single command. Humanity's weapon was not chaotic. It was calculated, unstoppable, and merciless. Inside, smaller defense drones emerged from hidden compartments, their shapes sleek, deadly, and silent. They struck with lightning speed, disabling the aliens' equipment and forcing them to retreat further. Lyrix's crew tried to respond, but the eternal vigil anticipated every move. It adapted, calculated, and punished with surgical efficiency. Lyrix stumbled to her feet, fear and awe battling in her mind. She had underestimated the ship, underestimated the legacy of a species that had faced extinction and refused to surrender. Humanity's final weapon was more than metal and energy. It was a reflection of their spirit, their pride, and their unbroken will. The orb pulsed again, sending waves of light that bent the very vacuum of space. Lyrix could see it in her mind's eye. The ship's power reaching out, touching the stars, marking every intruder with the memory of humanity's might. It was no longer a warship. It was a symbol, a living testament to the species that had dared to rise above every obstacle. She looked at her crew, seeing fear etched in every face. The Zetharians had come seeking power, treasure, and conquest, but instead they found judgment. The eternal vigil had awakened, and with it, the galaxy would remember why humanity could never be ignored, never be dismissed, never be defeated. Lyrics realized the truth in a moment of stark clarity. They were witnessing history, but they were on the wrong side. The humans who had built this weapon had vanished, yes, but their wrath lived on, silent yet inevitable, and now the galaxy would pay attention whether it wanted to or not. The eternal vigil pulsed again, brighter, stronger, and alive with the finality of human will. Humanity's judgment had begun. The eternal vigil roared with life. Its ancient hull glowed brighter than the stars around it, every pulse carrying the will of a species thought long gone. The Zetharian intruders staggered through its twisting corridors, weapons raised but hearts heavy with dread. No matter where they turned, the ship was there, watching, guiding, and judging. Commander Lyrax forced her crew forward. Her mind screamed for retreat, but her instincts told her there was no escape. "Keep moving!" she cried, her voice sharp with desperation. The ship did not block them. Instead, it led them deeper, pulling them toward something greater. Finally, the corridors opened into the core chamber once more. The glowing orb hovered at the center, brighter and stronger than before. Around it, fragments of holographic figures appeared, faces of men and women, human soldiers, engineers, and leaders. They stood in silence, watching the aliens with eyes filled with pride, sorrow, and something greater. Hope. Lyrics froze. For the first time in her long career, she felt small. These were not myths or ghosts. These were the echoes of humanity itself preserved in the warship. Every face told a story of struggle, sacrifice, and an unbroken will to survive. The holographic admiral stepped forward again. His voice was calm, yet it carried the weight of centuries. "You wanted to claim our weapon. You thought us gone, forgotten. But humanity never leaves its legacy unguarded. We are more than flesh and bone. We are memory. We are spirit. We are eternal." The orb pulsed and the chamber shook violently. Outside, the eternal vigil unleashed its fury once more. Massive beams of energy tore through space, ripping Zetharian ships apart as if they were paper. Their shields shattered, their engines melted, and their fleets crumbled under the precision of humanity's design. The ship was not fighting. It was reminding the galaxy of what it could do. Lyrax clutched the railing, her claws digging deep into the metal. Around her, crew members screamed as energy waves coursed through their bodies, disarming them without killing. It was clear now. The ship was choosing to let them live only so they could carry its message back to the galaxy. That realization sent more fear through her than death ever could. The Admiral's hologram gazed at her. "We do not seek conquest. We do not seek war. But know this, humanity will never be erased. Even if our bodies fall, our spirit will endure. Even if our voices fade, our weapons will speak. You awakened the eternal vigil, and now you must carry what you have seen. Tell your people. Tell all the galaxy. Humanity endures." Lyrax felt the weight of those words crush her chest. She looked around, seeing her crew on their knees, trembling before the vision of a species they had once dismissed as weak. The Zetharians had built empires on arrogance, on conquest, on the belief that no one could resist them. But now, in the heart of the eternal vigil, they understood what true power meant. The orb pulsed again, but this time the light was softer, almost warm. The holograms of the humans began to fade, their figures dissolving into streams of light that merged back into the core. The Admiral's voice echoed one final time. "Go. Leave this place. Carry the memory of what you have seen, and know, if the galaxy ever threatens what is ours again, we will rise." Then silence. The chamber dimmed, the light fading to a steady glow. The ship had made its point. It did not need to kill them. The eternal vigil was not a weapon of cruelty. It was a weapon of memory, of warning, of legacy. Humanity had spoken, and its voice was louder than any empire's. Lyrax fell to her knees, shaking. She knew her life and her people's future had changed forever. Humanity was not gone. Humanity lived in this ship, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The silence after the storm was heavier than the battle itself. The eternal vigil had quieted, its glowing veins dimming to a steady hum like a giant heart settling back into slumber. But the memory of its fury lingered in the shattered wreckage of Zetharian ships drifting outside, and in the trembling hearts of the survivors inside. Commander Lyrax stood motionless in the core chamber. Her crew knelt around her, eyes wide with fear and awe. No one dared to move. They had expected treasure, a relic, or perhaps a forgotten machine. Instead, they had witnessed the voice of a species that had refused to die. Humanity had spoken, and its voice echoed in every corner of their minds. Lyrics finally whispered, her voice trembling. We must leave. This is not ours to claim." Her words felt heavy, but no one argued. Even the most arrogant of her soldiers lowered their weapons. They all understood now this was not a prize. It was a warning. The ship did not stop them. The corridor shifted once more, guiding the Zetherians back to their landing craft. No defenses attacked, no drones pursued. The Eternal Vigil had made its choice, it had spared them. But mercy from such power was more terrifying than death itself. When the Zetherian craft pulled away from the warship, Lyrics looked back through the viewport. The colossal vessel floated in silence once more, dark and still as if nothing had happened. Yet she knew better. The ship was not gone. It was waiting, patient, eternal. Its light pulsed faintly, like the heartbeat of a guardian that would never abandon its duty. As their vessel jumped back into hyperspace, silence filled the cabin. None of the crew could find words. They had entered seeking conquest, and they had left carrying a burden, a truth that would change everything. Humanity, the species they had dismissed as scattered and extinct, was not gone. Its spirit remained, embodied in the Eternal Vigil. Back in Zetherian space, Lyrics reported the encounter. Her superiors scoffed at first, mocking her for tales of ghosts and ancient weapons, but then the recording spoke for her. The light, the voices, the destruction of entire fleets with precision and ease. The council chamber fell into silence as they watched. No one laughed again. The message spread quickly across the stars. Traders whispered at first, then smugglers, then rival empires. Soon, entire systems buzzed with the story. Humanity's final weapon had awakened. Some dismissed it as myth. Others trembled in fear. A few even hoped, because if humanity had left such a guardian behind, perhaps humanity itself was not gone. Across forgotten colonies and abandoned human ruins, faint signals stirred. Beacons long dormant blinked back to life as if answering the call of the Eternal Vigil. Somewhere, scattered remnants of humankind felt the pulse in their bones. It was as though their ancestors were whispering, "Rise again." The galaxy has not forgotten you. Lyrics knew she would never be the same. Each night, when she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of those human holograms, the pride in their eyes, the sorrow in their voices, and the warning in their final words. She understood now. The galaxy had lived in arrogance, believing humanity was gone. But the Eternal Vigil had reminded them that legacies do not vanish. They endure, waiting for the moment to rise again. Far away in the silence of dead stars, the warship drifted once more. Its lights dimmed, its voice quiet, but its heart still pulsed softly in the void. The galaxy might forget for a while, but the ship would remember. It would always remember. And one day, when humanity itself returned, the Eternal Vigil would be ready. Ready to fight, ready to protect, ready to remind the stars why humanity was the species that never surrendered. The aliens had entered the silent warship, but what they awakened was not just a weapon. It was a legacy. It was a promise. It was humanity's final roar.